Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of The Bullet. This one, a Training Friday edition of The Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me as he does on every Training Friday, Tom Walls of the Firearms Academy of Seattle. Been a couple weeks, Tom. How's it been going out there in the Evergreen State, man?
It's been kind of snowy and damp. I think you timed your vacation to the VI perfectly.
I did miss a bit of a blizzard here, and I can't say that I'm heartbroken over that. Do you want to touch off just a little bit of political news, which is our normal gig here? Is I cover the stories that affect our liberties, and Nebraska today they've been trying for the last 3 years to get permitless carry to go through. And there was a filibuster. They're trying again this year. There was a filibuster by the other side trying to stop it. Today, that filibuster failed. There's two more. They get two more attempts at a filibuster next week, but those are expected to fail as well. Things are looking good, possibly next week, for the governor to get the bill out of the Nebraska legislature.
I can just imagine. Oh my God, there will be blood on the streets in the Wild West that hasn't happened in 25 other states yet.
Yeah.
That have permitless carry. So I would call that a low odds situation.
Yeah. Well, if Nebraska and Florida are racing for 26, one of them is going to be 26. One of them is probably, if Florida does it, going to be 27. And South Carolina and Louisiana are in the mix for 28 and 29.
Wow.
So
that would be great.
Not so great news we were talking about pre-show out of Washington State, though, right?
Oh, man, you are a buzzkill. Washington State, unfortunately, for those of you not familiar with my beautiful, beloved Washington State, we are politically, unfortunately, in the throes of a Democratic administration and have been for some time. Not all of the Democratic governors have been bad. The current one, I can't say that about, nor our state attorney general, but the politics are ruled mostly by King County, which is Seattle, Tacoma, and then on the other side of the state, on the border near Idaho, we have Spokane. Those are the big cities, and then Vancouver, just across the river from Portland, Oregon. The rest of us are fairly conservative, and every couple of years somebody comes up and says we should split the state, gizzard to Gatch, north to south on the Cascade Mountains, and the east side can be their own state and be conservative, and the west side can go be like California. What's happening now is we have a bill that just passed the state Senate that essentially says manufacturers can be sued for wrongful use of their products if it's a firearm. So I don't want to spend time going down that rabbit hole. It has yet to go past the House. I don't have a feel for how it's going to go. I just read that news on my feed this morning. So the fight's out there. In every state. Sometimes we're doing well, sometimes we're not doing so good. So,
yeah. Well, let's go ahead and let's get into training and what we wanted to talk about today. We actually had this conversation through instant message when I was down in the Virgin Islands. We're going to be talking a little bit about backup guns today, and I want to lead it off by saying we all carry firearms, and hopefully everybody watching or listening to us carries on a daily basis. And I'm stealing this directly from Kathy Jackson, who I had a chance to run into this past week. And we carry for a very, very low probability need you'll ever need one, but a high risk that if you do need one and you don't have one. So you carry one. I'm going to say, do you need to, as a civilian, do we need to carry two? I pose that question.
You use the N word, Paul. You said need.
Aha.
How do you know? See, if I knew I needed one, I would take a rifle, or I simply wouldn't go there. I'll steal from the best always. I heard this and learned this from Tom Gibbons. It's not the odds, it's the stakes.
Yes.
Okay, so if it's one chance in 100, I'm going to stub my toe if I don't wear shoes. I'll go without shoes. If it's one chance in 100, somebody's going to shoot at me or my wife. Oh, hell yeah, I'm going to have a gun. I don't know when that's going to happen. I don't know when. You know this personally, but I'll share this with the listeners. September 11th, 2001, my wife was with my mother and my aunt touring the White House, and the terrorists tried to drop a plane on them. What are the odds of that? You just don't know that it's not going to happen. So first off, you have to assess your risks. And by doing that, you need to look at, why would I want to carry a backup gun, and what would it do for me? Now, when I was a cop, I always carried one, and I had to qualify with it because, people don't like cops and people steal cops' guns. I carry concealed as a civilian, so there's less likely, but why would I want to carry a gun? Do I want the extra ammo? Do I want the faster reload? Do I want a second gun in a place I can access if I can't get to my primary gun? Okay. And how deeply do we want to conceal it? Pulling up the dummy gun here. Oh, the cat just went behind the monitor. How special. Okay, this being the dummy gun, if I wanted to carry two guns, ideally, I'd carry it on my left hip, and my primary I tend to carry on my right hip. Backup guns we usually end up carrying under concealed conditions or deep concealed conditions. Not always, but some of us choose to do that. So you've got to look at those things. What you want your gun to do for you is to drive the mission. What if you spend time with a friend, a partner, a significant other, and they, for some reason, don't or can't carry or don't own a firearm, and you think there might be an unacceptable risk of needing to have to arm them in some situation? Are they trained enough to do that? All kinds of reasons why, and they're all personal, and you need to decide what those are. But that's the first thing I would think, Paul, is to start driving that, is to decide what you would need that gun for. And I would really love to hear some comments on that from our listeners.
Yeah,
because they're going to have different experiences from ours.
We're getting check-ins. We're getting a lot of check-ins, and thank you for doing that.
Yes,
we have
guys.
one that it came in about our urban versus rural discussion we had a little bit ago. And Jack Mead over on the Facebook side says, that's always the case. The big cities ruin everything because they are run by the emotional party of Dems. When cities are large enough, they run the rest of the state into the ground. I'm going to say I'm fortunate in that I live in the largest state in South Dakota, but our largest state is 200,000 people. So we're not talking a megalopolis here. South Dakota, Sioux Falls is in part still very much a small town. And we're still conservative on this side of the state, and even in my city. So we're more tolerant of some things than the rest of the state, but it doesn't mean that that we've gone full-blown liberal, except for my specific state House rep. And I'm not announcing this yet, but it has been running through my head a lot more lately that in 2024 there may be a Lathrop on the ticket in the South Dakota primaries. Just saying there.
I'll vote for you 4 or 5 times. I was cat wrangling here a while earlier. Yes, in the state of Washington, we got that same situation. I live, and I've said it before, in a rural county, Lewis County, mostly agricultural, very little industry, and very, very conservative. But we're a deep red island in a sea of blue in this part of the state. And we have a sheriff that's on our side as far as the Constitution, but it's tough.
We were talking just a little bit ago about that they wanted. You'd said that there's somewhat of a movement to split the state at the Cascades and let the east side be their own state. Well, Oregon is doing something a little bit different. And I know we've already got check-ins coming from Oregon today, so I know we got some people watching down there. Oregon has counties that want to split the state. They don't want to be their own state. They want to go join Idaho.
I heard that. That's not a bad idea, really. I'm very, very fond of Idaho. We looked at it as if we really have to leave Washington State, just can't bear it. Idaho looks good, but other people have the same idea, and the property prices are going up, especially just over the border. But right now, they're a neat place, and some wonderful people there.
Absolutely. I visited there several times over the past few years, both professionally as a truck driver and personally several times as well. My brother-in-law lives there, and just had a blast over there.
Yeah, we have some very, very dear extended family in Coeur d'Alene that we try to visit a couple times a year. But anyway, we were talking about
let's get back to backup guns.
backup guns, bugs.
Bugs, yes, absolutely. So, I personally, I do have the ability, and I occasionally do carry with a backup gun. It's not very common at all. I'm going to say I haven't done it in probably a year and a half, 2 years. It's been more than that because I believe it was before my stroke. I'm kind of with you though in that we were talking pre-show, and Susan is my backup gun.
Yeah, Diane.
If we go out in public, we're both usually armed, and she's a better shot than I am. So I guess probably I'm her backup gun.
One of the things we talked about several months ago when we talked about partners and being involved is Diane and I have similar tastes in guns. One of the things we always do is we know which gun the other is carrying. Mm-hmm. We have some that can exchange magazines and some that don't. Depends on the combination of where we choose to go. For instance, we went to Oregon for her birthday a while back, and with the situation there, legally we could not carry the higher magazine capacity guns, so we had to switch to different guns, and we each knew what the other had. I know where she carries it, I know where she keeps her extra magazine, and she does the same for me. With a backup gun, if you have a partner that may need to access it, they need to know that too. Actually, the gun's pretty much the last thing in the equation. When I was wearing the badge, and I had my exposed cop gun that bad guys like to steal, my backup gun was on my non-dominant side, my left weak side. I guess that's politically incorrect, but I don't care. The reason was, if this arm, my dominant arm, my gun side, was damaged, jammed up, busy doing something else, basically non-functional, and I couldn't reach with my non-dominant hand cross body, I wanted to have a gun I could access. So it's not only having the instant reload, the New York reload. Y'all know what a New York reload is. You drop your first gun, you grab the second one, it's already loaded. It's a lot faster than trying to reload.
Yes.
That's a quick way to get to another gun. If I'm doing a handgun retention situation and I've got my hand on my gun trying to keep it from the bad guy, my other hand is free, I can grab my non-dominant hand. You can think of a bunch of reasons we could play what if, but I tended to carry it where I could get to it. That's the reason I carry more than one knife. I'm right-handed. I've got a knife I can access with my left hand, just in case the right one doesn't work. So I'm not trying to be twice as lethal. I'm just trying to give myself more options, and that's based on what I think my threat assessment is. So as a cop, yeah, I always carried 2 guns. I knew some guys that actually carried 3. When you do that, you have to practice that gun. You don't just throw it in. Oh, yeah, here's my backup gun. Can you draw it? Have you got a system or a rig to do that with?
Can you draw it from the backup position?
Yeah, from the backup. If I'm rolling in the dirt, can I get to my backup gun if I can't get to my primary? So this dummy gun is a replica of something I carry frequently. It's a SIG 365 that goes in a pocket holster. I tend to wear cargo pants because that blends in with my environment. Here in Lewis County, I live a mile outside of town, and town is 650 people, not counting the dogs. I can get away with carpenter's pants from the feed store, and most people do. That fits my environment. Probably wouldn't work with dress slacks. So I've got to have a gun in a place, in a holster, in a pocket, somewhere secured, so it doesn't move around in the pocket. If you just take any small firearm and place it in any pocket, it's going to change orientation. You may be grabbing it like this. When you need a backup gun, you need it pretty quick. It's not going to be a fast draw, and you don't want any impediments to that difficult situation any more than you can predict or somehow train around. So figure out where you want to keep your backup gun. Do you anticipate being on the ground in a fight? Ankle holsters are cool that way. Right-handed shooter, typical place is on your left ankle on the inside.
Yep.
I never personally got into ankle holsters because when I had knees and hips that worked, martial arts training was a lot of kicking, and I'd wanted a couple extra pounds on one leg. That may change now, but there's all kinds of options. So think about where you want to carry belt, appendix, pocket. Think about where you're going to access it, what you're going to need it for, and at that point, you can start looking at what blaster to carry. You have a comment look in your eyes. You need
nothing yet. Nothing yet. I do want to mention about ankle holsters, though. That's when I do carry a backup. That's exactly how on the inside of my left ankle I am right-handed, and I know a few people. Well, that's their primary carry position. If I'm in a car, it's always available. Well, is it? Because I would imagine in your wife's car, it would be rather hard to reach your ankle from that seating position. In my RAV4, not a big deal. A big truck, not a big deal at all. Just make sure what you're using for either primary or backup that is accessible when you think you may need it.
So you actually need to try it, safely with a dummy gun replica, preferably, or a thrice checked empty gun, and see if it's something you can get to, because if you can't get to it, I don't care how cool the gun is and how much money you spend on the holster system. The bottom line is the mission drives the gear. Assess your threats, figure out where you want to carry the gun, and there's nothing wrong with having a couple different ways to do it, depending on your clothing for the situation, for the event you're going to, or to the beach, or whatever. But have it in place and practice getting to it to discover the flaws. It's difficult to do range work because most of the time, like with an ankle holster or this pocket holster, this is not something you would take to a class unless it was specifically for that, because it's difficult to reholster and manipulate safely without doing it very slowly, and that's fine. But do take your gun to the range, maybe have a second conventional holster for it that I can wear on a belt to practice the firearm portion of it. Learn how to shoot it. Learn where it hits. Check your ammo. Make sure your carry ammo will feed in this. We tend to run the same caliber, Diane and I, for most of our stuff, and our backup guns will run the same ammo that our larger guns do, so we have less of an inventory problem. But I know that because I tried it. As opposed to, gee, I should carry a backup gun. Okay, I have it. I'll stick it in a pocket. Now I have one, and never do a thing with it. Would you do that with your primary? So you've got to work with it.
One would hope now. Well, there are people that do. One would hope not, but there are people that do.
And we know that, and we're never going to eliminate that, but we can make people aware of the risks. That's like in a self-defense shooting. The shooting doesn't end when the echo fades. That's just the end of chapter 1. So buying your backup gun, whatever you choose, whatever you define your mission as, doesn't end with now I have a backup gun, I'm good to go.
Well, and look, the next place I want to go with this is let's talk about choosing the backup gun. Your primary, let's just say, is a G26 with a red dot.
Okay.
Very common. Your backup, I suppose you could in an ankle holster do a G26. You're probably going to want to go for a 43 or a smaller. We're usually talking a deep concealed gun, usually not talking optics. I think it's just you're going to want to. I don't know. You're going to want to think of how it's going to be used in your purchase decision. Also, Glock, with few exceptions, most magazines interchange.
One thing you mentioned was the red dot sights. I confess I'm switching more over to them as I age and eyesight fades. I don't believe they have a place on a backup gun, and I'll tell you why I believe that. The mission of the backup gun, getting back to that, because mission, intended use, intended results, drives your gear choice and drives how you do what you do. If I'm to the place where I need a backup gun, that means that my primary gun is either empty or has failed. or I can't get to it. Every one of those situations is a bad thing. I can't get to my gun, but I need it. I can't shoot my gun because I've already shot all the rounds out of it. I shot my gun and it malfunctioned, which means I shot my gun. So this is a bad situation. I've already got the problems of accessing my backup gun, likely, from in my case, because I carry left side if I carry backup, have to shoot with a non-dominant hand, so I'd better have practiced with that. And if I have the bulk and the what's the word? I'll make up a word, snagability of an optical sight, that's a problem. One thing I would make a strong recommendation for your smaller backup guns is a laser sight. Think of the distances likely to be involved. Play the odds. Probably going to be pretty close. You might not be able to even get the gun up to eye line. You may be shooting from the ground. You can't get the gun up to your eyes and stand on your hind legs like we do on a range. The laser systems now are wonderful. There's some good brands out there. Make sure it can be actuated. But you can do some really good close-in work really, really fast with a laser sight. They're not as popular as they used to be. But this is a perfect place for those. Oh, your sound's off.
Another really, really good use for laser sights, and I know this because my primary gun has a laser sight on it. I can't move like I could when I was 20 years old.
Yeah.
Trying to get into odd positions, for example, if I'm trying to take cover while trying to get out of my bedroom and see if there's any, and I practice this, see if there's anybody in the living room or where an intruder might be in my house, getting into that odd tucked sideways position so you're not exposing a lot of yourself. That's somewhat easier with a laser sight, simply because you can only expose part of one eye and you can see where that firearm is pointed.
Oh, you don't even have to have it anywhere near your eye. You can, I'll take my my tablet here. Okay, I can have some kind of a barricade here, and I can be behind it or looking around it. I don't even have to have the gun anywhere in front of my eyes. I can hold it down here by my chair. I could even do a Han Solo, because Han did shoot first.
Yes, he did.
Yes. I'm that old. I remember the film. So there are a lot of advantages to laser sights, and if you understand there's a bit of an offset with them, set them up for close in, 3 to 5 yards will be fine. Realize that probably is going to be a tussle and your target's going to be moving, so some acceptable combat accuracy. But yeah, laser sights close in are wicked fast, and that will help make up for that slower access to your firearm.
Absolutely. And I do want to remind everybody, if you have comments about anything about backup guns, get your comments in. We still got about 7 minutes left of the broadcast, and we got plenty of time to discuss your comments. If you're watching on the Facebook page or the YouTube page for Polite Society Podcast, just comment on that video. Otherwise, go to Twitter, tweet with the hashtag #TheBullet. And if you're watching on Facebook, go ahead and hit Twitter with that hashtag. I'll see it when Tom and I are together next time, and we'll discuss it then. Let's see here, and I know we're still at the check-in phase, and I want to go back to. I do want to get a comment from George about we're going back again to big city conversation, but this is a good comment. My brother-in-law was a judge in Seattle. He had and still has very liberal political views. Funny thing is, as soon as he retired, he moved out of the city because it's not safe anymore. Gee,
I'm gonna cry for what's happened to Seattle. I lived there in the late '70s, going to school, and it was literally the Emerald City. It was magical and fun and beautiful and fresh and relatively clean, and it's not the same place anymore. So, and I'm ever so glad we decided not to retire there.
Yeah, I wouldn't touch Seattle or Portland or anywhere in Southern California anymore. I used to live in Southern California. Never, ever would consider that option anymore. 500 Magnum says a revolver makes a fantastic backup gun or primary. It's more powerful, more reliable, and easier to conceal than a semi-auto, but autoloaders have much higher capacity, and there's pros and cons to every gun. I'm going to go out on a limb and say you get what you pay for. I've seen very unreliable revolvers, and I've seen extremely reliable semi-autos.
I think the word reliable has to come into play here. It's nice to have a little, the traditional J frame. They're, of course, being a revolver, they're a little wider, they're not as flat, they're a little harder to conceal. If that's okay with you, that's fine. I know a lot of people that have been saved by backup guns. Let me correct that. I've read about a lot of people saved by backup guns that were revolvers. And you're right. You're right. Also, 500 Magnum about the magazine or the ammo capacity. So there are trade-offs. You know, if you're pretty sure you can have somebody's hash settled in 5 rounds on your backup gun, great. If that's all you can carry, that's great. If the reliability is an issue for whatever, that's great. Cost, if it's a gun you already have, rather than go out and buy a new one, I think the word reliable has got to be the thing, because remember, in the world, if you're going for your backup gun, that fan has been covered and is spewing brown stuff. And you need something you can absolutely depend on, hopefully with a cartridge that will do you some good and won't take a bunch of rounds. The very first podcast we did together, Paul, about a year ago, we were talking about the effectiveness of a stop with various calibers, and surprisingly, it still took between 2 and 3 rounds. So, and that's hits, I should say hits. Now, assuming that you hit, say, 1 in 2 or 1 in 3, like the average person under stress, and it takes 2 rounds or 3 rounds to do that, you've really stretched or exceeded the ammunition capacity of a little 5-shot revolver. So, I'm going to factor that in. Like I say, my favorite is a SIG 365. Just when it had come out, it was a little problematic. When they got the problem solved, we bought a pair of them. We can exchange magazines if we need to. With the inventory, it gets a lot simpler. And ours are dead nuts reliable. I have never had a problem to date with that gun. So I'm betting my life on it. I'm betting Diane's life on it too.
The only firearm I ever had a reliability issue with, and I intentionally stressed it so it would, I had one summer when I had Kathy Jackson, I had Masada Youb, and I had Bob and Ben Branham all come up the same year to do training up here. And including my own practice, I intentionally did not clean my Glock Model 2340 caliber.
You are looking at the bottom of my notes.
I shot that thing until it had a problem so I could find out where that problem was, so I could then make sure it never had that problem again.
It's a thing with pocket guns, and I'm guilty of this as much as anybody. When I carry in a pocket, either as a primary because I need to go deep concealed, or as a backup, in the pocket holster, that protects it somewhat. But things happen. I'm not using it as much. Lubrication does flow. And eventually your perfectly clean and well-lubed firearm, by virtue of being in this position for a while, the lube tends to flow away for the places that need lube.
Yes.
Pocket lid gets in there. Crud, bugs, all kinds of crap gets in the gun. So periodically, maybe once a month or so, just pull it out, check it. Wife actually had magazine rust because she would carry it in a carrier that would get sweaty in the summertime, and she never thought about it because it was in the concealed part of the magazine pouch. Mm-hmm. So yeah, look them over. If you're going to depend on it for your life, don't say, I can't spend 10 minutes going over it just to check it. Yeah, that's false economy of time.
I think we're going to go a little over because I have one comment that's going to take us a little bit on a left turn, even though we're just about out of time. 500 Magnum says, I like to play musical chairs and switch up my carry guns. That's cool, but I would say please, please, please train with each gun you're going to be carrying. And if it, I personally, I tend to go with the Glock style of the safety is not pulling the darn trigger. I do not like manual safeties myself, but if you've got one, I would make sure all your carry guns have them and the same type rather than grip or thumb safety. And if they're Glocks, I wouldn't trade striker fire and safety guns back and forth. But that's me. Tom, you got any thoughts on that?
Let me just expand on that from an instructor's point of view. It's nice to shoot the guns we have. If they're very, very similar platforms, like you're saying, Paul, the Glock system, you're pretty much golden. I will switch back and forth. My carry guns are fairly nice ones, and I don't like to teach with them because it gives a student a false impression that you have to have an expensive, fancy gun to shoot well. When I teach, I tend to carry off-the-shelf, pretty much box stock stuff, or the same stuff that our students have. Like tomorrow, this weekend, we'll be teaching a couple classes. I'm going to be carrying Smith & Wesson M&P. I'm not going to carry a nice 1911. But Smith & Wesson M&P, 1911, different operating systems. 1911, I have to work the safety, make sure I get the grip safety activated or deactivated. Striker-fired guns, a little bit different trigger. So, if you're intent on doing that, just to kind of piggyback on what Paul said, practice with it. Maybe take a couple of days before you switch over and at least dry fire your next carry gun if you choose to rotate. And just kind of get back into the trigger, the feel. You've already, if you practice, like I suspect you have, your neuromuscular pathways will kind of remind themselves, wake back up and say, oh, I'm carrying System B now instead of System A. Instead of it, the first time you shot it in months and months and months, or touched the trigger and dry fired it, when you have a deadly force situation and you've actually got your gun out on a bad guy. So yeah, get back into it. I've got a dry fire session scheduled tonight after this podcast. I'm going to run down in our basement that's surrounded by the planet Earth and do my dry fire. And I'm going to be dry firing the gun I'm going to be teaching with tomorrow because I'm going to be shooting it.
We are late and we've got to get out of here, man. On our way out the door, anything from Firearms Academy of Seattle you want to plug today?
Real quick, the last weekend in May, Memorial Day weekend, we have John Farnham from DTI, who will be at our facility teaching his advanced urban carbine, which is a really neat class. He doesn't get out to the West Coast too much to do that, if I recall. So if you're in travel distance of the Pacific Northwest, take a look at our website, www.firearmsacademy.com, for the basic information on that.
Very cool. We do have to get out of here. Thank you again, Tom, and you're actually going to be joining us on the weekend show next week.
Yeah, you poor devil.
So we'll see you then. And everybody, thank you for joining. Thank you for commenting. And we will see you next time.